fabulous Roni Jenkins, who most of us know, the managing partner of the Three Tomatoes, a social media guru, author of Martini Wisdom. And our next speaker is Tiffany Townsend. So Tiffany is the Executive Vice President of Global Communications at the New York City Tourism and Convention Bureau, which is the official destination marketing organization, convention, and bureau for all 5 boroughs of New York City. Next, we have Sandi Durell. So Sandi is a producer, theater, and cabaret critic. She's the founder and publisher of Theater Pizzazz, an entertainment website that features a variety of writer voices. And then our last panelist, Patrick Pacheco. Patrick is an art journalist and Emmy Award-winning TV commentator whose works have appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, Esquire.com. He is also the host of an interview program, Theater, All the Moving Parts, which can be seen on Cooney TV. And he's the author of Cheetah, a memoir. So Patrick is going to be available later in the day with Cheetah's book.
Ann. Thank you. I'm so excited to host this panel because, as we know, we all just came out of like the worst times of our history within the pandemic. And so happy now that everything is over and we're sitting in here and we don't have masks on, although if you do, that's fine. But New York City's back. New York City's back. Let's hear a big hand, right? And you know, we've got these 3 amazing experts up here. And so let's just talk about a couple of things. And there's a lot of misconceptions about New York right now and what is going on. So we'll have Tiffany start.
We'll jump right into it.
Jump right into it because we were just having a conversation.
Good morning
in the
and happy
Friday.
Hi everyone. Good morning. Great to be with you all. Misconceptions. Well, I would say that a lot of people think New York is expensive. You know, I will say 2 things. I will say one is New York is a fantastic place if you want to do something over the top and luxurious, and New York can absolutely deliver on all of your hopes and expectations, but it is also affordable. And there are so many things that you can do that are value-oriented, and that's so much of the work that we do at the tourism office is really speaking to all of those different audiences. New York is an incredibly diverse place. You really can speak to all ages, all interests. So what we want to do is shine a light on what, if you're looking for something value-oriented, we have that for you as well. And so a lot of the work is just sort of like highlighting what those opportunities and what those experiences are. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions. Again, a lot of the work that we do is addressing any hesitations, any misconceptions that people may have around visiting New York and visiting really any part of the 5 boroughs.
That's great. And along those same lines, what are the recent trends that you've been seeing? We'll start with Sandi.
Well, I'm going to go straight to the recent trends that have to do with theater, obviously. That has to do with so many new things that are happening. And you know where they're happening? Downtown or out of the city, at BAM, at St. Anne's Warehouse, places where you now have the opportunity to go and to see things that, guess what? They come to Broadway also. And you can go downtown, you can go to the New York Theater Workshop, and you can see things that are a little edgier, or perhaps you can go to La Mama, a very experimental theater, which of course we all know. And it's more than that. It has to do with if you're coming to New York, and let's say you're an out-of-towner, and somebody says to you, and as they do to me all the time, what should I see? What should I see? Okay, you know something? Those shows that have been here for 20 years, they're going to be here. Wicked, Aladdin, The Lion King, they're all here. They're part of New York. So I would say, don't waste your money on that. You're coming here to see something that is new. So get yourself a ticket to Some Like It Hot, or see Life of Pi, or see Leopoldstadt. Shows, 3 different shows, completely different. And I think when you go home and you tell your friends about them, they're going to say, wow, it sounds like you discovered something that I wouldn't have even known about. That's what I have to say.
And along
of-
that line, Patrick,
yeah.
we were talking about this, like how to get the cheaper tickets and what to do.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that pays full price for tickets. And there's always a way. There's all sorts of discount websites that you can get to, TDF. And you can go on, and because of technological advances and the computer, you can actually see where you're sitting as well. That's kind of a new development in terms of that. And banking off of what Sandi said, it's hardly a trend. It's been around since the ancient Greeks, but a fun part of the theater is environmental theater. And for example, there's the Great Gatsby is coming to a hotel in Midtown, and you can dress up and party as if though it's 1928, if that's when Great Gatsby takes place, or you can choose not to. There are places like Sleep No More downtown in an old hotel that's been renovated.
The McKittrick, right.
At the McKittrick Hotel. So you can, a lot of times people don't like to participate, you're free not to. And there's all sorts of psychological preparations that the actors actually go through to read body language so that they know this person does not want to be touched, on top of which they could get sued as well. There are now intimacy coaches, which is another new trend in the theater and in film for that matter, where an intimacy coach has to be a part of the contracts of a theater to show where you can be touched or not be touched, whether you want to be kissed or not kissed, so that you are respected in every way. But I would encourage you to check out the environmental theater. It's a lot of fun.
And if I can just add to your point in terms of, to your point about not paying full price for tickets, if I can just plug for a moment a program that we produce, 2 programs actually, twice a year, Broadway Week, 2-for-1 tickets, and that is January and September, and then we also have Off-Broadway Week, also 2-for-1 tickets. So this is probably, I think, the best deal in town in terms of finding all the shows earlier this year in January, every single Broadway show, including Hamilton, was in the program. So it's a really wonderful opportunity, a great way to explore. And, it's the middle of winter, you're going to be indoors, so what better thing to do than to do Broadway? So
And Kids Broadway.
I'm sorry?
The Kids Broadway week, too.
And there's also Kids Night on Broadway as well, too.
And there's restaurant weeks as well.
And Restaurant Week, and that all wraps up into a program that we do in January and February called Winter Outings. So it's Broadway Week, Hotel Week, Must See Week, which is arts and cultural organizations, and then Restaurant Week. And so January, February is really the slowest season of the year for New York in terms of travel. So it's our way of generating additional business for the businesses and across Broadway, across hotels, et cetera. And for anybody who's traveling, it's really, if you want a deal, that's the best time to come. And then there's a couple of weeks during the summer when folk, us New Yorkers are out of town, but it's a good time also to come in or to stay.
I want to add to to what you're saying, especially now we're coming into this warm summer season. There is so much that is free. And especially if you don't have a lot of money to spend, I would think about just going over to the Delacorte, which is public theater, and seeing Shakespeare in the Park. They also have a mobile unit that is also free, and they're fantastic productions. Not only that, you get to see a lot of the bold names that you would see in a Broadway show. So nothing wrong with that. And then something else? I want to give cabaret a plug. So I want to say that there are new musical readings that are going on in so many of our cabaret spaces. And I'll just say 54 Below has a load of new songwriters that are producing and just presenting some of the biggest names from on and off Broadway in their readings. And then if you want some place where you can just have a drink, have some great music before the show, after the show, head over to Don't Tell Mama on West 46th Street. It's a fun place. For the price of a drink, you could sit there all night, listen to music, listen to singers who get up. You never know who's going to show up.
So
At Maurice Crisis downtown, Alan Cumming tends to hang out there a lot.
let's talk about where to find some of these places. I mean, obviously you have Theater Pizzazz. We've got the New York City Tourism website. Let's give some names of people if they want to take some notes of where to find this info.
Well, okay, so some shameless advertising. Yes, okay. About 16 years ago, I said to myself, I'm tired of writing for other people, so I'm just going to start my own website. And I did. And who knew? Because I figured, okay, so I was writing for The Examiner and other websites. At any rate, it really turned out to be more than I had ever anticipated, because suddenly good writers, people who are PhDs, who are teaching theater in universities, called and said, "Can I write for you?" And suddenly I now have 10 plus writers in both theater and cabaret. Listen, Theater Pizzazz is not Broadway World, it's not Playbill. However, it is a significant site that allows people to see what's going on in theater, in cabaret, to read some really fabulous interviews of some wonderful people. I mean, we've interviewed everybody from Cheetah Rivera to John Lloyd Young to Tony Danza. There's a lot going on, and it's daily updates. So a lot to read. So thank you for my Theater Pizzazz plug.
Patrick, what about outside of All the Moving Parts, which is a show that Patrick hosts on Cooney TV? Where else should people be going to find some of this information?
Well, I think that Sandi actually outlined a couple. TDF certainly has that as well. One tip that is you'll never hear from anybody, but one of the easiest places to get into a hot show is on opening night. I don't know, Sandi, if you've ever had that experience, but a lot of times they'll pull all these seats for an opening night performance, and then at the last minute they will release them. So friends of mine have gone out to an opening night, even of Hamilton, went up to the box office and got a pair of tickets to the opening night of shows. It's one of these weird phenomenons. Anormal phenomenons, but that's one tip that I can give you.
What a special treat. Now let's move over to some of the new things that we have going on in New York City. Obviously, Governor's Island has a lot of new things. There's Little Island. The Museum of Broadway just recently opened, which is fabulous. We had a Three Tomatoes event there a couple months back. It was great. Tiffany, you want to tell us about some of the newest things?
Sure. I would say on Governor's Island, there's a new spa that opened up last year, the QC. It's an Italian brand, a day spa that opened up. If you haven't tried that, so I would say that's what's new, certainly on Governor's Island. And the other part is the nice part is that Governor's Island is also completely car-free as well, so just great for strolling. Little Island is also fantastic, and what's new near Little Island is Pier 57, and that was actually one of the things I wanted to highlight in terms of sort of trends and newness is food halls. There's a lot of new food halls. So Pier 57 is the newest one on that side, just sort of like a couple blocks up from Little Island. You also have the Tin Building down by South Street Seaport, if you haven't tried that. So really focusing primarily on French cuisine, but everything from sort of like quick coffee and sandwiches to a more high-end experience. And then Urban Hawker, which is a Singapore-style food hall that's in Midtown. So those are three of the newest ones that that I think are great to try out.
Tiffany, did you say a spa?
Yes.
How does it work? I mean, did you go
Lie around and look fabulous. Just let other people do the
They
work
have a
for you.
great Instagram. I've seen their Instagram, and it looks like it's an infinity pool. It looks amazing. It wasn't that expensive. It was very reasonable from what I saw.
So you can just have a full day of a spa
Absolutely.
on Governor's Island?
On Governor's Island.
Wow. Sounds like
How
fun.
amazing, right? But
can
you
de-stress.
just touched on one of my other things, and I know you guys aren't food-specific experts, but obviously you're all New Yorkers, you're all experts in your particular things. Let's just talk about like whether it's you're going out for Broadway or cabaret, and everyone wants to get a bite to eat or a drink. what are your must-do places to eat before the show, after the show, and what's your favorite dish? We'll start with Sandi.
Well, generally, I like to stay pretty close to the theater where I'm going to be at. And you know something? There isn't one place that I can plug because there are so many different places in the Times Square area. And depending upon when you're feeling rushed or you're not feeling rushed, you have got an international cuisine at your fingertips. So what I would say is take a look in Time Out. Time Out has a wonderful array of different restaurants that they recommend in different parts of the city. So if you find yourself uptown, they're going to give you from Italian to Greek to Peruvian to you name it. It's all laid out. And downtown, of course, is a, well, you feel like you are visiting international cities when you're going downtown to eat in any of the restaurants, because I find that the most exciting place, actually.
Not Bubba Gump Shrimp Company.
No, I don't think so. And if you're
That's for the tourists, right?
no, but here's the thing, you know, if you're an out-of-towner and you're coming into the city and you're looking for a place to eat, I don't get it when people come in and, you know, they eat at McDonald's. Or they eat at a place that is in their own town or in their own city. You know, go and experiment a little bit, you know, try and find out where can I get the best buck, the best bang for the buck, and try something new.
Certainly in the theater district, I mean, with summer coming along and nice weather, al fresco, La Masseria on 48th Street is a good place. Joe Allen, of course, has been around since the 60s. And then if you want to be romantic, Chez Josephine on West 42nd Street is really lovely. Here's a tip that I don't think you'll ever find in a guidebook, and that is when you sit down, introduce yourself to your waiter. Usually the waiter will come up and say, "Hi, I'm Bob, I'm your waiter. Hi, I'm Giselle, I'm your waiter." Introduce yourself and introduce your party as well. You will get so much better service, especially if you're in pre-theater and you've got to go. Rather than saying, hey, I need the check, just say, Ray, they hear their names. They really hear their names. And a lot of times, they'll comp you all sorts of good stuff because they've had a bad day, and from time to time, they'll say, you're the best table that I've had all evening long. Thanks. Here's dessert on me. And it's just best. You'll just get better service.
Do you recommend, you know, slipping somebody the 20 or whatever it is,
well,
like
that
you always
always
see
helps.
in the movies?
That always helps.
Always helps for a little bit of a better seat, right?
Yeah, but it's really courtesy that they appreciate, and it's a real value to them.
Yeah. What about, Tiffany, you talked about food halls. I'm a huge lover of these food halls that, you know, there's one by Vanderbilt. Obviously, there's Italy. There's the one by Hudson Yards. Talk about some of those, because you just said one recently. I love like Smorgasbord, you know, a little of this, a little of that.
And I would say Smorgasbord is another good one. Let's see. Now, there's always so many to think about. But what I like is that a lot of these are specific to sort of either a region or a particular type of cuisine, so it makes it, I think, a little bit more manageable. Okay, I want Singapore, or I want Pan Asian, or something along that line. So it's a good way to sort of help you figure out, help make it more manageable for you as well. And then something that's not quite a food hall, but similar, there's a lot of night markets as well. So you mentioned Smorgasbord, which made me think of that. And so you've got night markets really all across the city. There's a Queens Night Market, there's a Bronx Night Market that's opening up, I think maybe just opened at the end of last month. And so that's another great option as well, maybe something that you can do after the theater also. So night markets and food halls overall. So those are a lot of the trends that we're seeing on the food side.
One of the nice things about food hall is that if you're alone, you can sit at a bar.
Yes.
At any restaurant. That seems to be a trend, because friends of mine like to just sit at a bar, especially if you're alone. The bartender will like the company.
Agreed.
And you'll meet people that are sitting next to you. I find more and more that I'm sitting at bars. not drinking nearly as much.
No, and that's great. I mean,
chatting.
I wanted to talk a little bit about solo travel because we have a good friend of the Tomatoes, Carol Sue, who travels a lot, solo around the world. And this seems to be a big trend, especially with women, and we're of a certain age. Let's talk about if you're a solo traveler, what would you guys recommend that person outside of sitting at the bar, maybe a solo woman traveler should be doing here in New York? What would your recommendation be, Sandi?
Well, since I'm not usually a solo traveler, I would say if it's somebody young, they really should be downtown because there's just so much going on. And I think that they would have a comfort level because the whole scene is young. And just finding any restaurant, bar downtown might feel a little, this is my kind of space, and I really like it here. If you're older, that's, let's not give any age brackets, but, people who are of a more grown-up age might feel better if they're sitting at Bond 45 at the bar, because you can not only get a drink or not, you can just have a nice little dinner at the bar, and that's a real comfort level. And then you're just a stone's throw from whatever show you're about to see.
Great. Tiffany?
I think one of the trends that we've seen across the board, not specific to New York, is just the rise of a lot of meetup groups that are geared at bringing solo travelers together from wherever they are. So that would actually be my suggestion, is before you arrive, maybe identifying, these companies. And honestly, I see a lot of them on Instagram. That is a great place to find them. And that can help you identify, like, are they trying to attract other people that might be like-minded, other people that I would want to potentially travel with at some point during, my stay in New York. Are these people I just want to have a quick dinner with or something like that, or maybe I want to do another tour, group tour, or something like that. So finding those meetup groups, or just finding a tour operator or travel agent who can connect you to a tour experience on the ground. And so that'll kind of give you, let's say, I'll call it a little bit of a framework for traveling solo, but not feeling like you're totally alone. There's still a little bit of social connection kind of built into your trip.
If you're going to museums alone, there are often programs that they offer as well, lectures and programs as well. I would attend those because you're likely to be in a like-minded group, and consequently could be talking to the person that's sitting next to you about whatever you're hearing, or just after that. If not, you might see them roaming the galleries as well, and that is an opening to say hello. Eleanor Roosevelt always said, do something every day that scares you. And it's usually that you have to approach somebody or talk to somebody because you're so fearful of rejection or whatever. 9 times out of 10, they respond. This is also true for celebrities, not necessarily to invade their space, but if you happen to be passing somebody who is a celebrity and you love their work, just say, love your work as you pass them. You will make their day.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about splurge items. I know we talked a little bit about budget, how to get inexpensive theater tickets, how to see free shows in Central Park. If money were no object, and we'll start with Patrick.
Oh, no.
Money were no object for
Money's
one day, what would you, money's always an object.
Money's always an object.
But-
I'm a freelance writer.
But, what is the thing that you would say it is worth every single penny?
Oh, food. Absolutely. I must have free lunch tattooed on my forehead because I'm a writer. Writers never have any money, but I would go for I would just look at the 10 best restaurants that the New York Times, recommends, and I would go right down the pike, and I would bring all my friends because the thing that you want to do, and I think everybody's had this experience, if you're sitting in a restaurant, you think of 5 people who would love it. Or if you're in the theater, you would think of 5, 6 people who would love it. Money's no object. I would bring 6 friends to go see Anne Juliet, and we would just have a ball. Share it.
Tiffany?
Yes to that. have all the courses, do all the wine pairings. That's like that's my piece of advice. The other thing I would say is, like, even if you live in New York, stay in a hotel. New York has fabulous over-the-top hotels. One of the best ones is the Aman that just opened in Midtown. Uber luxury, right? I mean, and we have plenty of luxury to go around. I would say that's a wonderful splurge. Again, let somebody else take care of you. Lay back, say, look fabulous at the end of it.
What are some of those luxury items that puts that hotel in particular over the top?
I think for that hotel, I think it's actually the quiet in Midtown. You know, when you walk in, it's hushed, right? And so, you know, part of the joy of New York is the bustle, but then sometimes you need a break from that, and that's part of it. And I think it's, you know, sometimes you hear this term quiet luxury in terms of things that it's not necessarily in your face. It's just sort of it's the little touches, right? It's the perhaps the what's in the mini bar, or the way that food is served to you in your room, or something that's brought to your room, an additional gift when you check in. Maybe for some hotels, if you have a butler, if that's an option, just things that they can do for you. You need somebody to find something for you while you're traveling that maybe you forgot. It's those little things that sort of just help make your trip a little bit easier, make you feel a little bit more special.
It's funny. I was just telling a story the other day. One night in Penn Station, I met a woman who sells luxury underwear, not hanky-panky, but like along the same line, to these upscale boutique hotels in case people forgot their underwear. And I was like, who forgets their underwear on a trip? But anyway,
as someone who travels a lot, I forget a lot of things.
I guess
maybe
they do.
not underwear, but I've forgotten a lot of things in my time.
Stranger things. But Sandi, what about you? What would you
I just
splurge
have
on?
one thing to say. The tasting menu at La Bernardine. That's a splurge.
I'll second that. And third.
And fourth.
Now, we talked about that, and we talked about budget items. What are some other things? You know, obviously there's museum free days. There's during the summer, at least, you know, the free summer concerts and everything else. But you know, what about throughout the seasons? What are we missing out on that you could just come in and maybe, you know, $20 and have a great time?
I think we're in the Scandinavia house, and if you're of Swedish descent or you're just a Scandinavia-phile, they have all sorts of programs all the time. I mean, New York City has cultural centers for every possible country and ethnicity. They offer free programs. If you want to submerge yourself in your own ancestral background, by all means do that. If you want to, you're a Francophile, go to the French, cultural center. Check out their programs of French films, and you can pick up the language while you're at it. These are kind of things, all of which New York offers and offers free.
I mean, on the cultural side, there's still so many organizations that offer their free nights or their free days. I was just thinking the Museum of Mathematics, because it's around the corner from my house. I didn't realize that they offer like 2 free days a month that you can go in, and it's the entire day. It's not just 5 to 8 on a Friday. So, or might be competing for other things that you want to be doing at that time. So that's actually on the free side. And there are so many cultural organizations and museums across the city that have a low price point to entry that might just be $5 or might be free all the time. And for me, I always say, get out and explore all 5 boroughs. That's where you're going to find a lot of that value.
That's great. You want to add
Oh, I don't know as much about the cultural centers and what they're offering free, but I do know that there are a significant number of free readings for new plays, new shows, new musicals. You don't always have access to it, but I think if you do a little research, you'll find that they're there, and you might be able to score an invitation.
Great. So let's dive into the Tonys a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, couple questions. Who do you think has been snubbed? What do you think the winners will be? Do you have any? I'm going to talk to you, Patrick, first.
And then
And then Sandi will jump in and just have a little banter about where we're going for the theater season this year.
Well, with all due respect, Roni, I think we should banish the word snubbed from this discussion, because in a way, the Tony nominators, of which there are 40 Tony nominators who are professionals in the industry, determine what the nominations are. And then they're voted on by 768 other industry professionals. I'm a Tony voter because I'm on the board of the American Theater Wing Advisory Committee, and it's the American Theater Wing that presents the Tonys. So it's a really stacked category. It's going to be very difficult for me to fill out the ballot this year because it's one half a dozen of the other. The great thing about the Tony nominations is that there's an enormous diversity. There was obviously a movement after the Black Lives Movement that there be more diversity in the theater, and there certainly is among the Tony nominations this year. The great thing about it is that it's highly, highly competitive, and it shows that Broadway is back. From pre-pandemic levels, it's only down about 15% in grosses and in seats. Asses in seats, you'll excuse the expression, is how it's generally the way they judge it. So the Tonys this year are going to be exciting. They're going to be a little really different because it's a different venue. Usually they're at Radio City Music Hall. Now they're going to be done at a classic theater uptown, all the way. Sandi, is it in Inwood?
It's the United Palace Theater.
Thank you. And the writer's strike has affected it. Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's going to be totally different. And the writer's strike has impacted it to the extent that they can't write the show. So people may be winging it. They're going to come up with something. And generally, when you have to wing it, wonderful things can happen. I mean, bad things can happen too. But wonderful things can happen. So
That's why they have the 3-second button.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's but what the writer's strike is pretty much taken care of in terms of I think they worked it out at this point that nobody has to worry about crossing a picket line, strictly so that the Tonys can go on. But and I can't remember the exact number of shows, but one of the things that happens, unfortunately, is that out of, I think it was like 133 shows were nominated, out of which 32 have already closed. So there's a whole bunch of shows that get nominated, and then nobody gets a chance to really see them, to know anything more about them other than the fact they're the name of a show. So I don't think that bodes well, frankly, that a show does not have enough longevity to be able to now be an active nominated show to make a difference in theater.
Why do you think that is? I mean, does Broadway need big names? Like, I can remember years ago going to see 3 Days of Rain, if anybody remembered that, like 1997, with Julia Roberts, Paul Rudd, and Bradley Cooper. It wasn't very good. It just wasn't, and I hate to say it. And those are huge names now. I mean, they weren't as big then. And who knew Bradley Cooper could sing? Which he did it in that play. But do we need those big names? What is it? Like, why? That's a horrible thing. People invest their life,
The cost of putting on a Broadway musical now is about $25 million. If you're looking at a Some Like It Hot or a show of that level. So think about how many tickets you have to sell at full price to make it happen, and for investors to actually get their money back.
We don't pay full price, right? We don't pay
No, we don't pay full price.
Well,
No.
okay. And then the other aspect is that I'm not a Tony voter. I am a Drama Desk and Outer Critics Circle voter, which now also takes into consideration not only Broadway, but off and off Broadway. So it's a very wide variety, which can be a little annoying, frankly, because you can't always consider an off-Broadway show in the same category as a Broadway show, but somehow they're all kind of like mixed up and mashed up together. I think It's a difficult situation, bold names or not bold names, to be able to have a show that's going to really have a life. I don't know that there will be any more Wickeds and Lion Kings and Aladdins that will go on for 20 years, or like Phantom, what was it, 25 years?
35.
35 years. And, you know, it was as strong as ever. And of course, in the last few months, it was stronger than ever because everybody wanted to see it. Broadway's a tough nut.
But a lot of things, to your point, Roni, is that an event can be something that comes out of left field, and it's just buzzed about, it's just talked about. The best, absolutely the best seller is word of mouth. You know, you just say, okay, you've got to see this show. And what's essential is you've got to see this show. Because if there's any reason other than that not to see the show, then you're not going to plunk down the money that it's going to take to do it. It can be from a show that comes out of nowhere, Fun Home, or other small shows. Kimberly Akimbo is one of them. It can be a big splashy show that may not have a name, but has a subject matter controversial. MJ just recouped after a year and a half on Broadway. And they had a big target on their backs because it was about Michael Jackson, certainly a controversial figure. But that goes to the argument, can you separate the artist from the art? You know, that goes, you know, to Wagner as well as things. People apparently could, to the extent that MJ not only is going to recoup, but is selling very, very strongly. So sometimes, and yes, there's Jessica Chastain now, and a lot of people are going to A Doll's House now. This is probably the 8th time A Doll's House has been on Broadway, and they're going to see it because it's Jessica Chastain.
And then how many times can they reimagine it?
Yeah.
Well, and Leah Michelle right now, she's a big name, right? She was on.
That's the big story. I mean, the big story is that with Beanie Feldstein cast in it, it was dying at the box office. Mm-hmm. Leah Michelle, who always wanted to play the role but was overlooked by Beanie Feldstein, came in, and the grosses literally went from losing money at $700,000 a week to $1.8 million. That's star power.
So that was a good investment. Let's pivot a little bit then to off-Broadway. You know, shows like The Fantastics, Blue Man Group. I know I've seen that several times. Talk about that as alternatives maybe, and some of the longevity of those things and what made them successful.
I would like to talk about that's like talking about a Wicked or some of the tried and true Broadway shows. They came about at a time when they were new, they were quirky, and they immediately had an audience. Also, as we were saying, downtown is where they really do attract the people who are interested in seeing something that is creative and not what they would usually see, let's say, on Broadway.
Like a Broadway show about corn? I mean,
well, that was the biggest.
Odd,
That's
right?
been the biggest surprise for everyone. Shucked. Who would think that would even? I mean, when I got a press invite to that, and I looked at what it was about, and I said, I know I have to see this. However, it doesn't really sound like something I'm going to really be that excited about. I walked out of there a happy camper. My God, it was funny, it was clever, and it had a message. So who knew?
Little Shop of Horrors is also off-Broadway. And it's interesting because it started off-Broadway decades ago, one of the first Howard Ashman, Alan Menken shows that put them on the map, actually, before they then went on to Disney fame and Oscars. Then it was done on Broadway and flopped. And it was recently revived off-Broadway at the West Side Theater on West 43rd Street. How many of you have wanted to invest or thought about investing in a theater show? Okay. Yeah, there's quite a few. A friend of mine invested in Little Shop of Horrors, put in $10,000. I think it was $10,000. You can come in at $25,000. You can come in at $10,000. It recouped very fast in 8 months, I think. So she got all her money back. And now she's getting checks regularly about $1,000 a month. It's found money,
Oh.
from time to time. So you can also lose it. And chances are you're going to
be okay with losing money.
You have to be really okay with losing money. 1 out of 5 Broadway shows succeed. It's got a 20% chance of getting your money back. Just to the Tony, if your show wins the Best Musical Tony, your chances of recouping go up from 20% to 75%.
And we have our Women of Purpose Award later, which I hope you guys are all staying for. And Pat Addis is, one of those incredible women who jumped right in there at a later age and did that. But we only have a few minutes left, so I just want to ask Tiffany, what is the one thing in New York City you would do over and over and over again and it never gets old? Like I always say, I'm a Sunset fan. They never get old.
That's actually a good one. I hadn't thought of that. That's a great one. I mean, for me, the ferries, because I live over here on the east side. I live up, so for me, it never gets old. It's kind of like an easy leisure cruise. There's wine on the ferry. If you haven't taken the East River Ferry, there's wine. I mean, there's coffee and there's beer too, but there's wine. So for me, that really never gets old. And also it's just walking the city and just seeing what's going on. I love to people watch. I don't know about anybody else. I love to people watch. That's some of the magic of the city. New York is a quirky place, right? And so that's for me, that's like a lot of the best way to just take it in.
That's great. What about you, Patrick?
Oh, the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, it never gets old. Walking across it, biking across it, it's a little dangerous. I mean, the thing about New York City now is it's like in London. Look both ways, because there are bicyclists hauling ass, you'll excuse the expression, the wrong way. Look both ways. Just assume that everybody out there is crazy. But going across the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, can I add one more?
Sure.
Seeing New York from up high, a view, whether it's an observation deck, a hotel, a rooftop bar, whatever that is, that truly never gets old for me. And seeing it from just different vantage points, seeing it from Queens, seeing it from Brooklyn, seeing it from Midtown, looking downtown, seeing it from Midtown, looking uptown, whatever that is, that never gets old for me.
What about you, Sandy?
Well, you mentioned the Brooklyn Bridge, and I have a couple of friends here who, hello, couple of friends, and we had a great time. It was, one of them walked over the Brooklyn Bridge to get there, but some of us just went an easier way. But if you go right over the Brooklyn Bridge to the waterfront, there is a merry-go-round. It is a old-fashioned, antique merry-go-round, and you can get on there and ride, and you get a ticket, and you can even catch a gold ring. And it has great memories of when you were a kid and takes you back in time, and it's such a fun thing. And I seem to remember there were some nice restaurants in the area, too.
That's great. What about, let's just talk about, 10 years from now, where do you see, I'll start with Tiffany. And I know you've been in your role for a couple years now, right? But you were there before and you're back.
I'm a boomerang,
Yeah.
yes.
So I'm sure things have changed since then. But where do you see New York 10 years from now in terms of tourism and travel?
Oh, I mean, look, I think things are on the up and up, and it's not to be like overly optimistic, but I mean, the city has made leaps and bounds in terms of recovering from the pandemic. We're not fully recovered, but we're probably about 85% of the way there, and I think we can expect to make a full recovery by the end of 2024. But we have a lot of big events. That's one of the best things about New York is we are the media capital of the world. We're the capital of a lot of things, and so that means we attract a lot of events that bring the world to us. And so we have in 2026, the World Cup is coming. We actually just unveiled the logo for the World Cup, which is going to be across North America, but we're one of 16 or 17 cities that's going to be host. So having major events like that, Sail GP is coming back to New York in 2024, and so just having major events that bring people to New York are the things that kind of continue to keep us moving forward. And I think people want to be in New York. They want to come visit. They want to live here. They want to experience the city. And so I think that's an energy that sort of feeds on itself, and people will continue to invest in the city. And so I think that's, at least from a tourism standpoint, that's going to continue to manifest in new restaurants, new hotels, new cultural organizations, or expansions to cultural offerings, all of those kinds of things.
What about theater? Patrick, Sandi, I mean, where do you see in 10 years?
Sandi?
Well, one never knows, of course, what's going to happen that far down the road. But overall, I think unless there can be some kind of accommodation made to tourists, and that has to do with pricing of hotels, pricing of restaurants, pricing of generally just being able to come to the city and really enjoy it and not keep looking for a freebie in order to do it. It's a very walkability city, without a doubt, so you're not at the behest of having to take even a subway or a bus, certainly not an Uber, unless, you're on a splurge binge. But I don't know how that's going to happen, Tiffany. How does the pricing and the huge costs of coming into the city somehow get reined in?
I mean, I think it's a tough question. I think it's a very valid question because it's something we keep an eye on, and we're looking at it not just from us who are here or maybe in New Jersey or Connecticut, but from around the world. Inflation is a real issue, and we know that will determine whether people come to New York or they decide that they're going to go to London instead, or they're going to go to Dubai, or they're going to go to Shanghai, or whatever that is. And so I don't think there's not necessarily one answer. I think there's a lot of different factors at play that are going to determine that. But I think it's a very valid question that we haven't quite figured out the answer to.
I would hope that in 10 years, New York will be cleaner, safer. The subways will be a model around the world. I would hope that there's direct transport from JFK to the city. I hope the transportation is better. The New York Times, I'm 74. And the New York Times said, in order to stay young, you should have friends that you see all the time in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, so 70s. So I took it to heart, and it does make an enormous difference. Because whenever I get a little jaded about the city or upset about a cyclist, even though I'm a city bike fan, a cyclist going up the wrong way, or people littering, or whatever else, the 20-somethings that I know are so enthusiastic about this city. They are so excited about the theater. They renew my love of it. Not that I've ever fallen out of love, but that's really true. And as my 20-somethings age into their 30-something, I get new 20-somethings and so on. But I would encourage you to have dinner with them. You get a totally different perspective on all sorts of political and social issues. But they really do renew your faith in the city.
That's great. So just as to wrap up, I had asked all of you to think about a special person or affiliation. I know, Patrick, you have this book about Chita Rivera. If you want to talk about it for a minute, and then we'll go down the line, somebody special to your heart that you got to meet in New York City through your job.
Shameless self-promotion. Shameless. 90 years of a life, 70 years of a career, totally living in the moment. So it was hard for me to pin her down, and she never would have sat down for the 2 years it took for us to write this book, except COVID interfered. The one song she could never sing was Stephen Sondheim's I'm Still Here, because she said, Patrick, I'm here. I've always been here, so how can I still be here? And then COVID hit, and there she was. So we sat down, and it was such a privilege to talk to her years as a Presidential Medal of Freedom winner from Obama, a Kennedy Center honoree from President Bush, 10 Tony nominations, and 3 Tony wins.
That's amazing. And the original Anita,
The original Anita.
The original Anita.
And she has a sense of humor about always being mistaken for Rita Moreno.
That's great. What about you, Tiffany?
Mine is not nearly that impressive.
Hard to follow that.
But I will say, I'll put this in the sprinkling magic dust category. I saw Eartha Kitt at Cafe Carlisle with my in-laws and my husband, and briefly got to meet her as she came off stage, and I think she may have like purred as she just like touched everybody's hand, and she was so lovely and so gracious, and it just it's the kind of encounter that makes you like kind of go like this and stand up a little bit taller, because she was just fabulous, just an aura, just really, really fabulous, and an incredible show.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandi, I mean, you probably have so many, I'm sure.
There are many, but my one favorite is also a very good friend, and her name is Marilyn May. Yes. So, a little bit more shameless advertising. I'm on a board of an organization called American Popular Song Society, and we are now honoring Marilyn May, a legend, on June 12th at Theater 555. It's a continuation of her 95th birthday, which was on April 10th this year. This woman is more dynamic and more powerful than she's ever been. And when you say to her, as I have often, Marilyn, you must be exhausted. She says, I'm not exhausted. Where are we going next? Because that's a typical Marilyn for you. So this is an evening where you will have an opportunity not only to see Miss May perform, but also there is a roster of Broadway and cabaret stars who will be there to perform on her behalf, and your ticket price also includes a reception right down the block at the Green Room 42. So June 12th, and I will leave these flyers somewhere outside. I know there's a place, and I hope to see many of you.
Great.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody up here, Patrick, Tiffany, Sandi. It's been wonderful, enlightening. Obviously, add the 3 Tomatoes to that list of places for the Insider Guide for women who aren't kids to New York City and other places. So thank you again for coming.